Captain Day stood in the command center of the Time's Resilient Dawn *, staring at the holographic display floating before him. The blue light made his tired face look even more worn. He had been awake for 20 hours straight. But sleep would have to wait. The message playing on repeat demanded his full attention. Please, anyone. They took our children. They took everyone. We cannot fight. We are dying. Please help us. The voice belonged to a Velen. The amphibian-like aliens were known across the galaxy for their gentle nature and beautiful poetry. They came from a world where the gravity was light, the temperature was always perfect, and violence was something they only read about in historical texts. Their bodies were fragile, their skin translucent and delicate. A strong handshake could break their bones. Now, 3,000 of them were prisoners. Lieutenant Hai entered the command center, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Day without a word. They had served together for 5 years, long enough to know when silence was better than conversation. The council is still debating, she said finally, taking a sip from her cup. Day made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. Of course they are. They have been debating for 6 hours now. The Galactic Coalition Council was made up of representatives from 47 different species. When humanity joined 15 years ago, they were species number 48. The newest members, the outsiders, the ones from the Death World. Earth was classified as a Class 1-2 Death World. Out of the thousands of planets in the Coalition, only 3 others earned that terrible designation. High gravity that crushed bones. Wild temperature swings from burning deserts to frozen tundras. Predators everywhere, from tiny bacteria to massive carnivores. Natural disasters that could wipe out entire cities. Earth was a nightmare planet, and humans were forged in its brutal fires. The other species looked at humans with a mixture of fear and pity. Fear, because anything that could survive Earth was dangerous. Pity, because surely living on such a world had been torture. They did not understand. Humans did not think of Earth as a torture chamber. They thought of it as home. Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the Council, said Wu from his engineering station. The man looked exhausted too, his black hair sticking up in odd directions. They want to speak with you. Day set down his coffee and straightened his uniform. The holographic display flickered and changed, showing the Council chamber. Dozens of alien faces looked back at him. Some had scales, some had fur, some had skin colors that did not exist on Earth. All of them looked worried. Ambassador Curell spoke first. He was a Thorian, tall and covered in golden feathers. His species was one of the strongest in the Coalition, their military legendary. Captain Day, Curell said, his translator making his bird-like chirps into understandable words. The Council has reviewed the situation. We have concluded that a rescue mission is impossible. Impossible? Day kept his voice calm and professional. But inside, anger was building. The Krath pirates have taken the Velens to the Forbidden Nebula, explained another council member. A crystalline being named Shah. The radiation levels there will kill most of our soldiers within minutes. The electromagnetic interference will blind our sensors. The pirates have 30 armed fighters. They have threatened to kill the hostages if we approach. And we have only 48 hours before they move the prisoners to the slave markets. Even if we could mount a rescue, we could not do it in time. Day looked at each council member in turn. He saw fear in their eyes. Real, genuine fear. They were not cowards. They were simply facing a situation that their evolution had not prepared them for. Permission to speak freely? Day asked. Curell hesitated, then nodded. You are right, Day said. For your species, this mission is impossible. Your soldiers cannot handle the radiation. Your sensors cannot work in the interference. Your troops need perfect conditions to fight. But humans are different. Different how? Curell asked. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day, Day said simply. Radiation? We have medication for that. Sensor interference? We will use old technology that does not rely on your fancy equipment. Hostile environment? We call that Tuesday. A ripple of confusion went through the council. Several members checked their translators, thinking they had malfunctioned. Captain, you do not understand the danger, Shah said, her crystalline voice tinkling like broken glass. This is not bravery we need. This is suicide. Then let us commit suicide, Day said. Give us permission to try. If we fail, you have lost 1 ship and 47 humans. If we succeed, you save 3,000 innocent lives. The council chamber erupted into debate. Voices overlapped in dozens of languages, all filtered through translators into a chaos of sound. Day stood silently, waiting. Finally, Curel raised one golden wing for silence. Captain Day, why would you risk your lives for a species you barely know? Humans have been in the coalition for only 15 years. The Velans are not your allies, not your friends. Why do this? Day thought about Earth. He thought about hurricanes and earthquakes, about winters that froze and summers that burned. He thought about how humanity had survived not by being the strongest or the fastest, but by working together, by protecting each other, by refusing to abandon those who needed help. Because someone has to, he said, and we can. The council voted. It was not unanimous, but it was enough. Permission granted. Day returned to his command center. Hai was already alerting the crew. Wu was running calculations on the ship's radiation shielding. Pilot Jin was plotting a course to the Forbidden Nebula. All hands, this is the captain, Day said over the ship-wide intercom. We have a mission. It is dangerous. It is probably impossible. But there are 3,000 people who will die if we do not try. I need everyone at their best. Get some rest, eat a good meal, and prepare for deployment. We launch in 4 hours. He turned off the intercom and looked out at the stars through the viewport. Somewhere out there, in a nebula that other species feared, helpless people were waiting for a miracle. They were about to get 47 humans instead. Close enough. The time's resilient dawn times cut through space like a knife through water. Behind them, Coalition Station Primus grew smaller, until it was just another star in the infinite darkness. Ahead lay the Forbidden Nebula, a swirling mass of purple and red gases that filled the viewport with an angry glow. Jin sat in the pilot seat, his hands steady on the controls. He had been flying since he was 16, first in Earth's atmosphere, then in space. He had flown through asteroid fields and solar storms, but the nebula ahead made him nervous, and Jin did not get nervous easily. Entering nebula boundary in 3 minutes, he announced. Captain Day stood behind him, watching the sensors. Already, the displays were showing dangerous radiation levels. Wu, how is our shielding? From the engineering deck. Wu's voice came through the intercom. Shielding is at maximum. I have rerouted power from non-essential systems. We will be fine for about 6 hours. After that, things get interesting. Define interesting, said Lieutenant He from the medical bay. The kind where I have to repair equipment while being cooked by radiation, Wu replied. But I have done worse. Remember that time we had to land on that volcanic moon? Let us not remember that, Day said. Everyone, anti-radiation medication now. Double dose. Throughout the ship, 47 humans swallowed small blue pills. The medication was developed on Earth, designed to help the body cope with radiation exposure. Most coalition species could not take it because their biology was too different or too fragile. The ship crossed into the nebula. Immediately, alarms began to sound. The radiation levels jumped. The temperature inside the ship started to climb. The sensors flickered and died, one by one, as electromagnetic interference scrambled their signals. Sensors are gone, Jin reported, his voice calm despite the chaos. Switching to radar. The coalition species had long ago abandoned radar as primitive technology. Their advanced sensors could detect a ship from light years away, could analyze its composition, could count the crew members inside. But those sensors needed stable electromagnetic conditions. Radar was simple. Radar bounced radio waves off objects and listened for the echo. It was old. It was basic. It worked. A green display flickered to life, showing blips and shapes in the nebula around them. "I have something," Jin said. "Large object, 10,000 kilometers ahead. Could be the Velen ship. Take us in slowly," Day ordered. "Weapons. I want a full sensor sweep, the moment we are close enough. Use passive detection only. I do not want to alert the pirates that we are here." Down in the weapons bay, Sergeant Tay was already at his station. He was a quiet man who rarely smiled, but his hands moved across the controls with the precision of a surgeon. Next to him, young Private Soul was checking ammunition counts, her fingers trembling slightly. "First mission?" Tay asked without looking at her. "Yes, Sergeant," Saul admitted. "I completed training 3 months ago. This is my first real deployment." "Advice," Tay said. "Fear is good. Fear keeps you sharp. Just do not let it control you. Trust your training. Trust your squad. You will be fine." Saul nodded, feeling slightly better. She had heard stories about Tay. He had been in the military for 15 years, had seen combat on 3 different worlds. If he said she would be fine. In the medical bay, Hay was preparing for casualties. She had beds ready, medical equipment charged, and enough supplies to treat a small army. Next to her, Dr. Yoon was reviewing files on Velen biology. "Their bodies cannot handle stress the way ours can," Yoon explained, reading from his datapad. "Their heart rate, when elevated, can cause organ failure. Their skin will tear if handled roughly, and their psychology is even more fragile than their bodies. They have no concept of violence. Seeing their captors hurt or killed will traumatize them. Then we need to keep them away from the fighting," he said. "That will be difficult if we are rescuing them from the middle of a pirate ship," Yoon replied. Hai just smiled. "Then we fight fast and finish before they know what is happening." The Time's resilient dawn times crept closer to the target. Through the viewport, they could now see the Velen colony ship. It was a beautiful vessel, all smooth curves and artistic flourishes. It looked like a sculpture, not a spaceship. But beautiful things break easily, and this one was broken. Scorch marks covered the hull. Several sections were venting atmosphere, and attached to it like a parasite was a Krath pirate vessel. The Krath were scavengers and slavers. They were not strong fighters, but they were cruel and they were numerous. Their ships were ugly, functional things built from stolen parts and salvaged metal. "I count 30 heat signatures on the Velen ship," Tay reported from weapons. 28 Krath. And it is hard to tell. Maybe 2 Velens? The rest must be in cold storage, or already dead. "They are not dead," Day said firmly. "Corporal Bin, get your team ready. We are going in." In the cargo bay, Corporal Bin was already gearing up. He moved with calm efficiency, checking his weapon, his armor, his emergency equipment. Around him, his squad did the same. They were Marines, trained for combat in hostile environments. Earth had given them plenty of practice. Specialist Ara was loading her demolitions equipment, humming a cheerful tune as she packed enough explosives to level a small building. Combat Medic Han was double-checking his medical supplies, making sure he could treat both human and alien wounds. "Listen up," Bin said, his voice cutting through the activity. "This is a rescue mission, not a combat mission. The pirates are secondary. The hostages are primary. We get in, we secure the Velens, we get out. Speed is more important than style. Clear?" 1. "Clear, Corporal," the squad replied in unison. Jin maneuvered the Times, resilient dawn times, into position. The plan was simple in theory, complicated in execution. They would dock with the Velen ship on the opposite side from the pirate vessel, breach through the hull, and extract the hostages before the Krath knew what was happening. Coalition observers are hailing us, Wu reported. They want us to abort. They say the risk is too high. Tell them we are experiencing communication difficulties, Day said. Blame it on the nebula interference. With pleasure, Captain. The ship shuddered as the docking clamps engaged. The sound of cutting torches echoed through the hull as the Marines prepared to breach. Day checked his sidearm one last time. Captains were supposed to stay on the bridge, but this was humanity's first major rescue operation in Coalition space. If it went wrong, he wanted to be there. If it went right, he wanted to see it with his own eyes. Breach in 30 seconds, Ben reported. Day took a deep breath. On Earth, people used to say a phrase before doing something dangerous. Something that acknowledged the risk and embraced it anyway. Let us show them what Deathworlders can do, he said. The cutting torch finished its work with a shower of sparks. The circular section of hull fell inward with a metallic clang that echoed through the damaged ship. Corporal Bin was first through the breach, his weapon up and ready. His helmet display showed thermal readings, structural weak points, and the locations of life signs throughout the vessel. Clear, he whispered into his radio. The Marines flowed through the opening like water, spreading out to secure the corridor. The Velen ship was cold and dark. Emergency lighting cast everything in a dim red glow. The air smelled wrong, filled with smoke and something chemical that made Sol's eyes water even through her helmet filters. Life signs confirmed, Han reported, checking his scanner. I am reading Velen biosignatures, 3 decks down. Approximately 2,800 individuals. They are clustered in what looks like the cargo holds. And the Krath? Bin asked. Spread throughout the ship, 12 near the Velen prisoners. The rest are on the bridge and in the docking area with their ship. Bin quickly divided his forces. Tay, take Sol and Han. Get to those prisoners. Ara and I will secure the bridge. Captain, you stay here and coordinate. Day wanted to argue, but Bin was right. Understood. Everyone. Remember the mission parameters. We are here for the Velens, not to fight pirates. But if they get in your way, we remove them. Ara finished, patting the explosives on her belt. Efficiently, the team split up. Tay led his small group down a corridor that angled toward the lower decks. The ship was listing slightly, and the artificial gravity was failing. They moved carefully, weapons ready, sensors alert. They found the first Krath pirate in a junction between corridors. He was a large creature, covered in thick scales, with 4 arms and a tail. He was eating something from a ration pack. His back to them, he did not hear them approach. Tay made a simple hand gesture. Sol and Han moved to flanking positions. Then Tay struck, his rifle butt connecting with the back of the Krath's head. The pirate dropped without a sound. Bind him, Tay ordered. Keep moving. They descended 2 more decks without incident. But on the 3rd deck, everything went wrong. A Krath guard spotted them and raised the alarm before Tay could silence him. Suddenly, sirens wailed throughout the ship. Lights flashed. And from both directions, armed pirates came running. Contact! Han shouted, opening fire. The corridor erupted in chaos. Energy bolts flew in both directions. The Krath had weapons designed to punch through armor and kill instantly. They aimed for center mass, just as they had been trained. The bolts hit Tay square in the chest. He stumbled backward, slammed against the wall, and dropped to one knee. Sol screamed, thinking he was dead, but Tay stood back up. That hurt, he said calmly, checking the scorch mark on his armor. Sol, suppressing fire on the left. Sol's training took over. She fired in controlled bursts, not trying to hit anyone, just making the pirates keep their heads down. Han threw 2 canisters that exploded into thick clouds of white smoke. The smoke contained painkillers and anti-shock medication, designed to help wounded soldiers. For humans, it was helpful. For most aliens, it was like breathing pure medicine making them dizzy and confused. The Krath in the smoke started coughing and stumbling. "Move," Tay ordered, and they ran through the confusion, leaving the disoriented pirates behind. On the bridge, Bin and Ara had their own problems. They had entered through a ventilation shaft, dropping down behind the Krath commander and his guards. The fight was brief and brutal. The Krath commander was faster than Bin expected. He drew a blade and slashed, the weapon cutting through Bin's armor and into his shoulder. Blood welled up, hot and painful. But pain was just information. Bin had been taught that in training, had proven it in combat. He ignored the wound, grabbed the commander's arm, and used the alien's own momentum to throw him across the bridge. Ara was already at the control panel, her fingers flying across the alien interface. "I am locking down the pirate ship's docking clamps," she reported. "They will not be able to escape or send reinforcements." "How long until they break your lock?" Bin asked, keeping his weapon trained on the stunned Krath commander. "Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe less. These pirates are surprisingly good with technology. Then we have 5 minutes. Finish your work." Below them, Tay's team reached the cargo hold, where the Velans were imprisoned. The door was sealed, and behind it, they could hear the sounds of crying and frightened voices speaking in a language none of them understood. Han pulled out a universal translator. "This is a rescue team," he said slowly. Clearly, the device chirped and whistled, converting his words into Velan. There was silence. Then, a weak voice responded. The translator converted it. "You are human? The Deathworlders?" "Yes," Tay said. "And we are getting you out. The pirates said they would kill us if anyone came." The pirates were wrong. Saul was already setting cutting charges on the door hinges. Small, precise explosives that would blow the door open without harming anyone inside. It was delicate work, and her hands were shaking from adrenaline. "Steady," Tay said quietly. "You are doing fine." Saul took a breath, placed the final charge, and stepped back. "Everyone, cover your eyes," Tay announced in both languages. 3, 2, 1. The charges detonated with sharp cracks. The door fell inward, and beyond it, in the dim light of the cargo hold, thousands of Velans stared out at their rescuers. They were small, barely reaching a human's chest in height. Their skin was pale and translucent, showing the delicate bone structure underneath. Their eyes were huge and wet, filled with fear and hope and exhaustion. One of them, slightly larger than the others, stepped forward hesitantly. "You came," she whispered, through the translator. "We did not think anyone would come." Han moved into the cargo hold, his scanner active. "I am reading severe dehydration, malnutrition, and stress-related health issues. We need to evacuate them now." "Agreed," Tay said. He activated his radio. "Captain Day, we have located the prisoners. Approximately 2,800 Velans, all alive. Requesting immediate evacuation." "Copy that," Day's voice crackled back. "The Times Resilient Dawn Times is in position. But we have a problem. The Krath realized what is happening. They are trying to breach our ship. We may not have much time." On the bridge, Bin heard the same transmission. He looked at the Krath commander, who was smiling despite his defeat. The alien spoke through Bin's translator. "You cannot save them all," the commander hissed. "You do not have enough time. You do not have enough space. You came here to be heroes, human, but you will leave as failures, and I will enjoy telling everyone how the mighty Deathworlders could not even rescue helpless amphibians." Bin considered his words. Then he smiled. It was not a nice smile. "You know what is funny?" Bin said. "You think like every other species in the coalition. You think there are rules, limits, safe margins. You think like someone who evolved on a gentle world where everything made sense." He leaned closer to the commander. "We are from Earth. We do not know what safe margins are. And we are very, very good at doing the impossible." The evacuation was chaos. Tay and his team guided streams of frightened Velans through the corridors toward the docking point. The amphibian aliens moved slowly, their bodies weak from captivity. Some had to be carried. The younglings clung to adults, their large eyes wide with terror. Sol found herself carrying 2 Velan children, one under each arm. They weighed almost nothing. She could feel their hearts racing against her armor. Rapid little beats like frightened birds. She wanted to tell them everything would be fine, but she was not sure that was true. "Keep moving," Han urged, supporting an elderly Velan who could barely walk. "The ship is just ahead. You are almost safe." On the bridge of the Times Resilient Dawn *, Captain Day watched the numbers climbing on his display. 700 Velans aboard. 1,000. 1,500. The ship was not designed for this. Life support was already straining. The corridors were packed with refugees. "Captain, we have a problem." Wu's voice came through the intercom. He sounded worried, which was never a good sign. "I have been running calculations. The ship's maximum safe capacity is 2,000 individuals. We have 47 crew members. That means we can take 1,953 Velans. No more. End. 2,000. End quote. And how many Velans are there? 2,800. Day felt his stomach drop. 847. That was how many they would have to leave behind. 847 people who had survived captivity, who had waited for rescue, who would now die because mathematics was cruel and uncaring. "What if we exceed safe capacity?" Day asked. "Life support will fail," Wu said bluntly. "Not enough oxygen, not enough power. The ship will become a tomb. We will lose everyone. Sometimes, Captain, you cannot save them all." Lieutenant Hai appeared in the command center. She had been coordinating the medical efforts, treating Velans as they came aboard. Her uniform was stained with strange colors, alien blood and fluids that human doctors never studied in school. "I heard the conversation," she said quietly. "We need to make a choice. Do we save some? Or do we lose all? Trying to save everyone." It was the kind of question they taught in military academies. The impossible choice. The moral calculus of survival. Day had always hated those exercises. Now, he was living one. "Contact the Coalition observers," Day ordered. "Ask them if any ships can reach us in time to take the extra passengers." A moment later, the response came back. "Negative, Captain. The nearest Coalition vessel is 12 hours away. You have less than 1 hour before the Krath reinforcements arrive." Day stared at the display showing his ship's capacity. The numbers were clear. The mathematics was simple. But he was human. And humans had a terrible habit of ignoring mathematics when lives were at stake. "Get me Wu," he said. "And Jin. And anyone else with a crazy idea. Now." And 5 minutes later, the senior crew was gathered in the command center. Day explained the situation quickly and clearly. "We need to fit nearly 3,000 Velans plus crew on a ship designed for 2,000, he said. "Physics says this is impossible. I am asking you to prove physics wrong. Talk to me. Anything." 2. Wu spoke first. "We could vent the cargo bays to space. Use them for life support storage instead of cargo. That gives us more room." "Not enough," Jin said. "We also need to reduce our oxygen consumption. Lower the temperature. Cold air means people need less oxygen. The Velans will freeze," Hai objected. "Their biology cannot handle cold temperatures." "What if they were asleep?" Dr. Yoon suggested. He looked tired and uncertain, but his eyes were sharp. "Medically induced hibernation. Their metabolism would slow down. They would need less oxygen, less warmth, less space. We could pack them much more tightly." "Can you do that?" Day asked. "Put 3,000 Velans into hibernation?" "I can do it for 3,000 anyone," Yoon replied. "The medication is universal. But I will need help. Every crew member who knows first aid will need to assist." "And the conditions for the crew?" he asked. If we lower the temperature and oxygen levels enough to support 3,000 hibernating Velens, what does that mean for us? Everway. Wu pulled up calculations on his datapad. His face went pale as he read the numbers. Temperature would be 2 degrees above freezing, he said slowly. Oxygen levels at 60% of normal. Gravity at 1.5 standard to compress available space. We would need to maintain these conditions for 48 hours to reach coalition space. The command center went silent. Everyone understood what those numbers meant. Humans could survive in those conditions. Technically. But it would be painful. Dangerous. Possibly fatal if anyone had underlying health conditions. We could die, Jin said quietly. All of us. Yes, Wu agreed. But the Velens would definitely die if we leave them. This way. Everyone has a chance. Day looked at each of his crew members. He saw fear in their eyes. But he also saw determination. They were scared. But they were ready. I cannot order you to do this, Day said. This goes beyond any military regulation. Beyond any reasonable expectation. If anyone wants to object, speak now. I will not hold it against you. I will not hold it against you. Day said. Anyone? No one spoke. Then let us do the impossible, Day said. Wu. Start venting the cargo bays and rerouting life support. Hi. Yoon. Begin hibernation procedures. Everyone else, help get the rest of the Velens aboard. We leave in 30 minutes. End off. We have to the Velens of round. The next 30 minutes were the longest of their lives. The crew worked frantically. Hauling equipment. Treating Velens. Preparing the ship for conditions it was never designed to endure. The Velens who were already aboard were put into hibernation, their bodies going still and peaceful as the medication took effect. They were laid out in rows, packed closely together but carefully, like precious cargo. Corporal Bin and his team returned from the Velen ship, bringing the last of the refugees. Bin's shoulder was bandaged, and he was pale from blood loss. But he refused to rest. All Velens accounted for, he reported. 3,000 exactly. 800 younglings. The rest adults and elderly. Any casualties? Day asked. 0 Velen casualties. 6 injured humans. All stable. It was the best news Day had heard all day. The last Velen was put into hibernation. Dr. Yoon personally checked each one, making sure their vital signs were stable. Then the crew sealed the doors and prepared for the journey. All hands, this is the captain. Day announced over the intercom. We are about to do something dangerous. The ship's environment is going to become extremely uncomfortable. Cold, low oxygen, high gravity. We will maintain these conditions for 48 hours. I know you are all tired. I know you are scared. But 3,000 lives are counting on us. We can endure this. We are human. He paused, then added, Woo, begin environmental changes. Let us bring these people home. The temperature began to drop. The oxygen levels decreased. The gravity increased. And throughout the time's resilient dawn asterisk, 47 humans stripped down to minimal clothing, teeth chattering, and prepared to suffer so that others might live. In her bunk, Private Saul wrapped herself in a thin blanket and shivered. Her fingers were already going numb. Her head ached from the thin air. But when she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of the Velen younglings she had carried. She remembered how light they were. How frightened. She could endure this. She would endure this. Jin sat in the pilot's seat, flying through the nebula on fumes and determination. His breath came in short gasps. Ice was forming on the viewport. His hands shook on the controls. But his course was steady. 47 hours and 53 minutes to coalition space, he reported, his voice hoarse. Everyone, hang on. We are going home. Hour 32 felt like forever. Captain Day sat in his command chair, wrapped in every blanket he could find, and still he shivered. The command center was so cold that frost covered the displays. His breath came out in white clouds. Every breath hurt, the thin air burning his lungs. His muscles ached from the increased gravity, making even simple movements exhausting. But he stayed in that chair. If his crew was suffering, their captain would suffer with them. Throughout the ship, the other 46 humans endured. Lieutenant He made rounds through the corridors every hour, checking on crew members, making sure no one was slipping into hypothermia or oxygen deprivation. She moved slowly, fighting the gravity, her medical scanner gripped in numb fingers. Engineer Wu stayed at his station, monitoring the ship's systems with burning eyes and frost-covered hair. 3 times. Critical systems threatened to fail. 3 times, he rerouted power and made repairs with tools that kept slipping from his frozen hands. In the pilot seat, Jin flew like a machine. His reflexes were slower than usual. His vision blurred, but he kept the ship on course. The nebula tried to kill them. Radiation spikes, gravity wells, debris fields. Jin dodged them all through sheer determination and skill. Private Saul lay in her bunk and counted seconds. She had learned that trick in basic training. When pain becomes unbearable, count. 1, 2, 3. Keep counting. As long as you can count, you are still alive. Still fighting. She made it to 100,000 before she lost track. Hour 43. Corporal Bin collapsed while making his patrol. Combat medic Han found him in a corridor, unconscious, his lips blue from cold. Han dragged him to the medical bay, his own body screaming in protest. Together with Lieutenant Hai, they worked to stabilize Bin. Warming blankets, oxygen supplement, medication. Bin's eyes opened. The Velens? He whispered. Still alive, he told him. All of them. Bin smiled and let his eyes close again. Good. Hour 46. Wu reported that fuel reserves were at critical levels. They would make it to Coalition space, but just barely. There would be nothing left for maneuvering or corrections. Jin would need to dock on the first approach, or they would drift helplessly in space. I will make it, Jin said simply. His voice was weak, but certain. Hour 47. The ship crossed into Coalition space. Sensors detected them immediately. Coalition Station Primus sent an emergency response team. Medical ships, rescue vessels. They had been waiting, watching, not quite believing that the human ship would return. Coalition Station, this is the Times Resilient Dawn *, Day transmitted, his words slow and slurred from cold and exhaustion. Requesting immediate docking and medical assistance. We have 3,000 Velen refugees aboard. All alive. All alive. All alive. All alive. There was a long pause. Then, say again. Resilient Dawn. Did you say 3,000? Confirmed, 3,000. But that is all of them. You saved all of them? We are human, Day said. We do not leave people behind. Now please, open your docking bay. My pilot is very tired. Jin brought the Times Resilient Dawn Times in on the last drops of fuel. His hands moved across the controls with the last reserves of his strength. The docking was not pretty, not elegant, but it was successful. The magnetic clamps engaged with a solid thunk. Docking complete, Jin announced. Then he slumped over the controls, unconscious. The medical teams from Coalition Station Primus swarmed aboard the Times Resilient Dawn *. They were shocked by what they found. The ship was barely above freezing. The oxygen levels were dangerously low. The human crew was scattered throughout the vessel, most unconscious, all suffering from exposure. But in the cargo bays and corridors, 3,000 Velens slept peacefully in hibernation, safe and warm in their medical sleep. Dr. Yoon was the last human awake. He had stayed conscious through sheer willpower, monitoring the Velen vital signs until the rescue came. When the Coalition medical team reached him, he managed to hand over his datapad with all the medical records before collapsing. For 6 hours, The coalition medical teams worked frantically. The Velans were brought out of hibernation, carefully, gently. They woke, confused, but alive. The humans were treated for hypothermia, oxygen deprivation, and exhaustion. None of them had permanent damage. They would all recover. It was a miracle. Several coalition doctors said so explicitly. By every calculation, by all the mathematics of biology and physics, the mission should have failed. People should have died. But the humans had rewritten the mathematics with willpower. 3 days later, Captain Day stood in the Grand Hall of Coalition Station Primus. He was wearing his dress uniform, though it felt strange after spending days in just thermal underwear. Around him stood his entire crew. They looked tired but proud. Facing them was the entire Galactic Coalition Council. And behind the council, filling the observation galleries, were thousands of spectators. Many of them were Velans who had come to see the humans who saved them. Ambassador Kurel, the Thorian with golden feathers, stepped forward. He held a small box in his wing hands. Captain Day, crew of the Times Resilient Dawn Asterisk, Kurel said, his voice carrying through the hall. The Galactic Coalition has existed for 700 years. In that time, we have awarded the Star of Compassion to individuals who showed exceptional dedication to peace and protection of life. Never, in all those years, have we awarded it to an entire crew. He opened the box. Inside were 47 medals, each one shaped like a star and made from a rare crystalline metal that glowed with its own internal light. You were told the mission was impossible. Kurel continued. Every military analyst agreed. Every probability calculation showed failure. We expected you to die, or to return with whatever few you could save. But you did not accept either of those outcomes. You saved everyone. All 3,000 lives. The Velan ambassador stepped forward. She was the same one Tay had spoken to in the cargo hold. The one who had not believed rescue would come. Tears ran down her translucent face as she looked at the humans. We thought you were monsters, she said softly. Dangerous beings from a violent world. We feared you, but you are not monsters. You are the kindest people we have ever known. You suffered so we would not. You risked everything for strangers. We will never forget this. One by one, each crew member received their medal. When it was Private Sol's turn, her hands shook as she accepted hers. She was still just a young soldier, barely out of training, and she had helped save 3,000 lives. The Velan younglings she had carried were in the audience. They waved at her, their large eyes bright with happiness. Sol waved back, smiling. When the ceremony ended, the crew gathered outside the hall. They were famous now. The story had spread across the galaxy. Humans did the impossible. Humans saved everyone. Well, said Wu, looking at his medal. That was interesting. Interesting. He repeated. You almost died of hypothermia, and you call it interesting? I have done worse, Wu said, grinning. Captain Day looked at his crew. They were battered, exhausted, but unbroken. Exactly what he expected from humans. Captain, Jin said quietly, the Council wants to meet with you. They want to create a new division, a rescue force made up of humans. They are calling it the Deathworlder Response Corps. Day thought about it. Across the galaxy, there would be more impossible situations, more people who needed help, more missions that other species would call suicide, and humanity would be there. Tell them yes, Day said. Tell them we accept. 2 months later, Private Sol was no longer in the Marines. She had transferred to the Deathworlder Response Corps and was training for her next mission. Sometimes, she thought about that night in the cargo hold, carrying the Velan younglings through smoke and fear. She had been so scared, but she had done it anyway. That was what it meant to be human. To be scared and do it anyway. To see the impossible and try anyway. To face the dark and keep going anyway. The galaxy had learned what Earth knew all along. The harshest worlds create the strongest protectors. The most dangerous environments forge the most compassionate hearts. When others said impossible, humans heard a challenge. When the helpless needed saving, the call went out to the beings from the death world. The ones who knew how to survive. The ones who refused to quit. The ones who would never, ever leave someone behind. The humans. The Deathworlders. The heroes.